We can't gather in person this year, but we've adapted. The 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival brings the best in film from across the globe and around the corner. And this year, it's all virtual, so the films and events are coming directly to you. Join us for the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival, October 15th through the 29th. More information is at mkefilm.org/MFF.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Day 10 of the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival presented by Associated Bank. I'm Kara. I'm the Artistic Director at Milwaukee Film, and this is the Nightcap presented by the Yabuki Family Foundation. Couple of housekeeping reminders before we get into our Q&As this evening. I want to remind you to cast your vote for the Alan H. Budd and Suzanne L. Seelig Audience Award. To vote, you will go to the film or shorts program that you watched at watch.mkefilm.org, either using your ticket code or if you're logged in as a pass holder. And you'll see a button there that says vote here, and you'll just click through and you'll see a ballot. Same range as always, where 5 is excellent and 1 is not so excellent, but unlike in person with the paper ballots, you won't need to tear. You'll click the button and hit submit. And anybody in your household who watched together, each can cast their own ballot. We want to make sure everyone's opinion is heard. It really means a lot to filmmakers to, hear audience response, particularly in this time where they don't get to see you and hear you laugh or gasp at their films in person. So really take that time to vote so that we can share your responses with filmmakers as we will have some winners. As you've also seen, we have a double up challenge currently happening. Thanks to the generosity of Judith McGregor and Richard Galloon, they have challenged us to raise $75,000 during the film festival. And if we can do that with all of your help, they will match it with $75,000 of their own. Couple ways you can help us meet this goal. You can text double up to 44321, as you see scrolling on your screen. Lovely there. You can go to our website to mkefilm.org/donate and donate at an amount that you would choose if you prefer not to text it. You can join us as a member. Those of you out there who might not yet be members, please consider joining us as a member. Our members are fantastic. They are gorgeous. They are stylish individuals that help us do everything that we're able to do year round, virtually and not virtually. They help us bring education programs to young people here in Milwaukee, to bring filmmakers into schools, and they get free things and discounts and all sorts of goodies as our appreciation. So members, thank you. People who may not yet be members, please do consider joining us during this festival, as your dollars will be doubled, as they say on the telethons. And if you're buying tickets and you're like, I can't make a huge donation, but I have a couple of cents, your roundups on your ticket purchases also count. So everything counts. As of this morning, we were just over 75%. We're at 76% of the way to $75,000. I don't have that math in my head. If somebody wants to do the math, do the math. You're wonderful. But we're not quite there yet. And I've heard that if we don't hit it, they won't double it. So help us achieve that goal. Help us continue bringing great films to you, even virtually as possible. And if you've already given, thank you so much. Tell your friends. Help us get to this challenge. This evening that we are going to be joined by the director of The Dilemma of Desire, as well as some of the team behind Ahead of the Curve. I said earlier that this is it's like ladies' night, but like in the most intersectional woke way possible. If that's a theme that you can get behind, get into it. Wherever you're out there watching us live, feel free to drop your questions and comments in the chat where you are. They'll make their way to us here, and the programmers will feed them into the discussion as is appropriate. And if you're watching us on the recording, you will be at the mercy of whoever asked questions when they were watching live. So first, I'd love to welcome on screen with me the director of The Dilemma of Desire, Maria Finitzo.
Hi,
Maria, how do I do on your last name? I didn't double check my pronunciation before.
You did just fine. Congratulations.
I always get nervous. As a Kara who's not a Kara, I'm always like, oh. So, Maria, can you start us off by telling us a little bit about the origin of this film, kind of where it started, kind of as an idea?
So it started by when I read a book called The Science of Female Sexual Desire, What Do Women Want? and it's written by a really good journalist named Daniel Bergner. And he went around the country, and I think into Canada as well, and interviewed scientists who were studying female desire. And at the end of the book, the whole exploration of this question, the upshot of the book was women have as robust a sex drive as men. We're simply told lies about it to reinforce patriarchal structures. And so that was interesting to me for two reasons. One, here we have science saying, women, you have as robust a sex drive as men. And I asked myself, well, that's really great. Now, what are women supposed to do with that information, right? We're not, we don't enjoy the same freedom that men do, and I'm using these terms kind of broadly, have when exercising their agency over their desire. So what was most interesting to me as a filmmaker was how in this time period, which was 2013, what were the things that got in the way of women having the freedom to behave in whatever way made sense to them. So that question was looking at the different institutions in our country, politics, religion, social institutions, academia, all of those things that still, after all these years, and all the changes we've gone through as a culture, still essentially punish women for wanting sex.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most wild moments is the, sort of, it took till 1998 for sort of a full kind of like medical, like mapping of the clitoris structure. I was just like, wait, hold on, that seems awfully recent. And sort of one of the shocking moments about sort of the slowness of this sort of study, even just sort of the naming of female desire. Sort of shocking to me. You said that you started this in like 2013. I think that was what you just said. You read that article in 2013. So this is a film and, sort of an idea that you've been living with for quite a while. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the process of sort of looking outward? And I'm specifically interested in kind of how you found kind of your 4 kind of core expert subjects. And then from there, how you kind of wrapped around them with this chorus. It's almost like a Greek chorus of like other voices of everyday folks, non-experts. Can you talk a little about the process of character selection?
Sure. So the first thing that has to happen when you get an idea about what that you want to make a film about is you have to figure out how it's going to be cinematic and how will you get into this topic. And since I was not really interested in making a film about people having sex, I was more interested in the connection between how women are viewed as sexual beings and our connection to power and equality. So I started looking for people who were working in this space, right? So different, artists, scientists, all of that. And the first person I found was Sophia Wallace. Her work was widely distributed on the internet, and she was at that time, very, kind of a very famous in a way. And Lisa Diamond was actually in Daniel Bergner's book, so I knew about her. Mm-hmm. So I initially had those 2 people and started, saying, okay, this is the cornerstone of a film. And I went in 2016 and started filming with Sophia. So the other thing that happens with a film is you can't just say, I want to make a film about this, and then people hand you money. You have to go make the film, or at least the film. And then you have to say, look, here's my film. Now you give me money. So in filming with Sophia Wallace, she's just a very generous, connected person. And she told me about Stacey Dutton. And I, went and got on a call with Stacey and was so fascinated and appalled by the fact that in college textbooks, if I had 5 of them in front of me, 3 of them would not have the accurate depiction of the clitoris in the textbook. These are college level textbooks. And so she became a natural person to have in the film because she was able to talk about, it's not just that nobody talks about the clitoris or women's pleasure. It's that you can't even find a picture of it anywhere, right? A true picture of it, right? It's purposefully left out of textbooks. And so I started filming with the 3 of them. And then it became very clear. I mean, they're not, I call them the experts, but they're not really experts in the way I treat them in a film story. it became clear that what would be really, I think, important was to have in the film, women in the film who don't easily talk about these subjects, right? So Sophia talks about the clitoris very easily. Lisa Simon talks about it easily. Stacey Dutton talks about it easily. That's not really true for most of us, right? Before I started making this film, I don't think I'd used the word clitoris in a complete entire life. So, I wanted to see how their work was resonating in the lives of just everyday human beings, right? And I wanted those people that I was going to look at or follow, include in the film, to be diverse in every way possible, both from ethnically diverse and gender orientation diverse and religion, and as they ranged in age from 22 to 40. And so I started filming with the 5 women I chose, and I'm going on a long time. But the way I found them was I sent out, my producers and I sent out notices to anybody we knew. And we said, we're making this film. If you know people who identify as women or femme-identifying or non-binary, whatever it is, who would be interested in hearing about it, please tell them to come to this meeting. And so I had a meeting and probably 50 people showed up and showed a clip of the film, and instantly people were ready to talk about it. Everyone in the room was so eager to talk about it. And one woman's, we don't ever get a chance to have this conversation. I'm so eager to be able to hear what everybody has to say. So at the end of the conversation, which was really great, I passed out a form and said, if you're interested in being interviewed, fill it out and I will interview you. And that's how I found the 5 women that were ultimately in the film.
Yeah.
And then the last person to join was T. Chang. And I was referred to her by a couple of people. And so after about, I think I'd been shooting for about 2 years. She joined the club.
So, sort of, this long labor of exploration and curiosity and questioning and sort of like, congratulations on on finishing it. I mean, it feels like you deserve that appreciation and the honor of having this film be done and ready for people to watch it. And we'll talk a little bit about that reception in a minute. But before we get there, I'm interested in hearing if there were surprises. You went in thinking, well, I want to sort of understand this, and you're understanding it from kind of varied stakeholders that when put together, like there's sort of a singularity of the vision of like what is missing, but from such different kind of positionalities. Are there things that you found sort of revelatory or surprising that you've discovered over the course of this?
Well, I would say the first discovery I had is when I met Sophia Wallace before I began filming with her, and that was in 2013. And the first discovery was when she showed me a picture of what the clitoris looked like. And I essentially said, oh, wow. But what was for me, and it always happens in a film, is so great, is that I come along for the ride, if you will. I discover things that I didn't know. It's I learned stuff. I get to meet amazing people. I think if there was a surprise, this is a very personal film, and a lot of times people don't really want to talk about sex or their desire or the problems with sex or any of that. And yet all of the people in the film were very willing to share their stories. And I was very touched by that. And many of the interviews in the film are the first times I'd ever met those women, right? So I did film over the course of almost 3 years, but a lot of the material in the film is the first time we'd ever met. And they were so open and willing to talk. And so I guess that surprised me, right? And I also, I guess, was surprised by the fact, I grew up in the 60s. And so I thought we'd kind of gotten over a lot of this stuff. And yet what I realized is that we haven't. And if anything, we've slid backwards. And so what's kind of sad is to realize that young women who choose to be sexual in whatever makes sense to them are still running up against shaming, and it's a dangerous landscape for them. And there's no sense of entitlement that if they're going to share their body with someone, that they're entitled to get something back in return or even first. And so that to me was, made me angry and also made me sad.
Yeah. I think, the film participates in sort of a normalizing, right? Like one moment, but some of the folks that you are working with are doing that all the time. So I think that that's like these moments of like, oh, wait, this can be a thing that is talked about. We can say these words, we can normalize desire across all different kinds of identities, and make it something that is talkable. That brings me to the question I want to ask about like challenges, specifically wondering if it was a challenge to get kind of production funded, given this sort of veiled nature of the topic and the subject matter and sort of the perception of it maybe as political.
Very political. And I think one of the problems that happens is when you talk about women and sex or women and pleasure, instead of just having it be a conversation about a normal physiological function that all human beings experience and therefore should, women's pleasure gets pushed over to the pornographic, right? So it's not just a normal thing. There's got to be something deeply pornographic about it. And so when you try and pitch film like this, people immediately are afraid of it, and they're afraid of it because they don't know what you're going to do, and they are worried that I don't know, that you'll see people having sex in the film or something, and so there was a lot of resistance to funding it, and it took me a long time before I finally got support, and I had to get better at pitching the film, and I had to keep filming. I had to keep shooting and saying, no, this is what it is. It's about really women's power and their equality. And finally, I did get support from a funder, major support from a funder, and then an investor. And interestingly enough, both of those people are men. So it was hard for women when I would go and pitch the film to them, because they would then say to me, how can I pitch this to my boss? Because they have to pitch it out, right? And so I forgot how hard it is for people to talk about this, because I started talking about it and I haven't stopped. And so my filter, right? So I felt kind of bad. I thought, well, gee, I haven't helped these women at all in their being able to be comfortable with saying this is a film that we need. So, I've gotten sort of better at it. I sort of start with really simple facts. I mean, how do you feel about the fact that women's anatomy doesn't meet the bar for truth in a college level textbook? Does that bother you? Women are taught sex education. Girls are taught sex education without ever mentioning the clitoris. Imagine we taught boys about sex education without ever mentioning the penis. So, when you sort of look at those things, and a couple times people have asked me, well, what's the big deal? And I, like a couple men, and I've said, well, name a point past the age of 2 when you didn't know you had a penis, what it was for and where it was. But yet women wake up at the age of 27 and say, oh. So it's really, it's not really about sex. It's not really about the clitoris. It's about the experience of women being validated and respected in whatever arena that is, whether it's in the bedroom or the classroom or at work or in church or in medicine and science. And that's really what the film is about.
Yeah. And so you pressed through all of those challenges to sort of convince people that it was worth making. So I'm so happy that you were able to sort of work that out and make progress even in spite of some of those challenges and hurdles. A thing that I found maybe not surprising, but pleasantly surprising or maybe unexpected was there's so much joy. You might think that a film about it kind of like these sort of erased or dare I say, like cloaked topics, could be kind of a lamenting, kind of a mournful, like, oh, so much time, so much knowledge, so much agency lost. But the film is so bright and joyful. Was that something that was important to you, or is that something that sort of happened naturally with the folks that you were working with?
Well, I'm a big believer in whatever film you're making that it always helps to have humor. And because this is a topic that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, a lot of people can't even say the word clitoris, I thought right as soon as we could, we needed to bring in some of the humor, right? So the man on the moon stuff and all of that. A lot of Sophia Wallace's laws are funny, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are very funny. Others are very serious. And because what happens is the clitoris starts out as an organ on the body of every mammal born female, and then as the film progresses, the narrative arc of the clitoris is that it becomes a metaphor. And it becomes a metaphor for inclusion and joy. Sophia Wallace says that all of the things in our life that are beyond our base reproduce and die. It's joyful, it's creative, it's empowering. It's for some people an act of, pleasure is a form of resistance. It's part of a revolution. And so it's joyful. There's a lot of joy in the film, and I wanted people to be able to embrace it and not be afraid of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is just a film talking about the most intimate choices we make as human beings. And those choices belong to us. We're the ones that should make them, and we should have all of the information we need in order to make those choices, right? And so even though the film deals with a lot of serious subjects, and a lot of them, I did want to end with a real feeling of empowerment, which is why the film ends the way it does.
Yeah. And I can only imagine that Sophia is a joy to work with because of that sort of like deep embrace of like, I don't know, the ironic, the dark, funny, the sort of like, this is very serious, but here's it's tight. It's
yeah. The whole
sharp.
The whole is not the whole. Everybody laughs when they hear that.
Yep. Right? Very, very sharp. So I want to get to sort of the reception of the film, and you have the we were talking about the class of 2020 before we got on screen, and so the film was set to premiere at South by Southwest, which got canceled. We spent a lot of time talking about that moment, but can you talk a little bit about the choice to sort of let the film out, even in kind of this virtual environment, and how, was there a sense of urgency, and then what the reception has been like in sort of coming into all of our homes?
So I think every filmmaker who was set to premiere somewhere mourned the loss of an in-person screening. And I always felt, and I still feel, that if this film was shown with an audience at the end, people would be standing up and cheering, because it's that kind of a film. But what was important to me when we took a little time after South by Southwest canceled, because of course nobody knew what was going to happen. We were all a little bit in shock. And then it just was very clear to me that I didn't want to hold the film for a whole year, and wonder if the pandemic would be over with now, right? And so it just became really important to get the film to an audience. And so several festivals, Hot Docs, we had gotten into Hot Docs and AFI, and they were starting to transition into digital. And so we did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you make the most of the experience, and festivals have gotten better and better at it. Everybody's doing sort of really creative things. And I think that's what we have to do, is we have to be nimble. We can't say, oh, gee, this wasn't the way it should be, because there's a lot of things right now that aren't the way they should be. And there's a lot of loss that we're all dealing with, some of it quite profound. And so it was, for me, very important that we start just getting the film to audiences. And, maybe in some ways watching the film in the privacy of your home, if you're a little bit concerned about the subject matter, makes it easier to do, right? Because you have some privacy.
Yep.
And one of the really joyful things for me has been, we get a lot of emails from people. And across the board, the emails have been overwhelmingly positive, and they range in age from hearing from 13-year-old girls to 80-year-old men. I got an email from an 80-year-old man who said, I've been married to my wife for 50 years. I love her very much. I thought I knew everything about women. I watched your film. I guess I don't. I'm really excited for your new kind of feminism. Thank you. So, you know, that's great, right? And so we also get letters from mothers and daughters saying, thank you for making this film. I was able to have a conversation with my daughter about sex and her experience, and the daughters are able to talk to their mothers about their experience. And so that's what has to happen. We have to be able to have conversations about this, or we won't get past the discomfort. And you know, for me, the film is really, I mean, I really am a big fan of Audre Lorde. That's kind of a crazy way to say I admire her deeply. But I mean, what she's saying is that if women are disconnected from the erotic, which is a source of power in their life, then they're disconnected from so much of what the potential for their life is. And for me, it's really a way of, you know, when you take that from somebody, you take away all of the ways they can envision or imagine the possibilities for their life. And you take away their access to power, both personal and political. And so that to me is what this film is about. I mean, if you lie to girls and women from the beginning about their anatomy, then how are we ever going to be equal? How are we ever going to have our voices heard? Right? Because you rob us of so much as we grow up and move into adulthood.
Yeah. I had not even thought about the way that this film and so many films that we show might be easier to sort of take a risk on in sort of a private viewing space. I had not even like in sort of like, as opposed to going and then feeling in public like you don't know something you should have known, because it's, you know, like this sort of personal knowing. So that's a wonderful sort of unexpected, strange outcome, I guess, you know, sort of like having to sort of put the film out in sort of an unexpected kind of a way. Did you feel an urgency around kind of the that little election that's happening this year? Did you feel like the film sort of participates in some of the conversations that we want to be having prior to the election?
I hope it does. I think that we're all really distracted right now and, you know, deeply anxious. And I think, the good news and the bad news is that in 2021, people will still not know about the clitoris and still not be able to say the word. And so the film is in some respects fairly evergreen, at least for a while. But the film is dealing with what's happening right now, which is that women are losing ground in terms of their control over our bodies, right? I mean, we don't have control over our bodies now. We don't have, our reproductive rights are being chipped away. Roe v. Wade is certainly going to go away. And it's also just, it's just the way women are treated, right? We have somebody in the White House who has admitted to sexually abusing women, right? So what does that say about the state of womanhood in the world today? And not just women, but any, you know, anybody who's not a white heterosexual guy. And I like white heterosexual men. I got a lot of friends who, so I'm not anything against them. It's just that the binary that's in power now, and that's not good, right? So I think, imagine this. Imagine if we, from the beginning, taught little girls about their bodies. And we taught them about their bodies in a way that didn't make them feel ashamed or uncomfortable. That this was something that, a wonderful thing that was within their bodies and that capacity for it. And it was a great source of power. Imagine how that might change the world. If little girls grew up that way instead of the way most of us grow up.
Yeah. And I think every little person deserves to feel powerful and autonomous, and like they have agency and, you know, their own sort of personalized internal and external and like outward facing and internal facing strengths. And so that's like, you know, one piece of exactly that. All the little people.
Human beings deserve to own the knowledge of their bodies.
Yep.
Period. Right. And it's what Sophia Wallace also says in one of the laws: all bodies are entitled to the pleasure they're capable of. And so that's also really what the film is trying to get across as well. Right. that pleasure isn't something that just belongs to one group.
Right. Yeah. And that there's many kinds of pleasures, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Do you have any updates on like what your subjects are up to, maybe particularly in this time of being distanced from one another?
Well, Sophia and I just we made a short film. She recently had a baby, and so I was given some grant money to make a short film around the themes of dilemma of desire, and so we did that. But we also included the sort of whole idea of motherhood and how you know, the fears that some women have that when you become a mother, you'll be changed, right?
Yeah.
Or everything about you will be erased because now you'll have to take care of somebody else. And so we made this wonderful short film, and we also were able to connect it in a way that I've always wanted to the whole notion that Audre Lorde is talking about when she's talking about the power of the erotic. She's not just talking about a culturally cliterate world. She's talking about an anti-racist world and an anti-sexist world. And so that was important for me to see that connection. Lisa Diamond is continuing to do her work. Chang is making beautiful vibrators. Stacey Dutton is still fighting the good fight and doing research. Sunny and her friend Nadia are in graduate school in economics, meeting head on all of the misogynistic culture of that academic environment. Becca is doing her art, and Mariana is doing her thing. So everybody's doing all their stuff. I missed having them all together for an in-person screen.
Right. Yeah. And I assume you've shared the film with them individually, but not in a communal space. But it's the magic of getting to watch a documentary with those who are featured is, I know, one that lots of filmmakers are missing out on in this time. What's next for the film? And you mentioned the short film that you've worked on. Are you working on other projects that we can kind of keep an eye out for?
No, right now it's most of my attention is getting the film, figuring out its distribution and how it will live in the world. I think in 2021 we'll probably do a digital theatrical release. Hopefully I'll be able to sell the film. It's already gone into educational distributors because one of the things I'd love to see this film on every single college campus in the country. I'd also love to see it in every high school in the country. That might be a little more big of a hurdle. But so that's, you know, I think when you make a film, that's the easy part. It's what comes afterwards. Like how do you put it out in the world, and how do you get the film to have the impact that you want it to have? And so that's where our focus is right now. And the film is going to be in Doc NYC in November, in Rain Dance in the UK, in LA, I think in early January, a week in England. So it's being shown widely.
You're really hitting the circuit, and you know, if there's you know, to come virtually, it's a whole lot easier for you to visit these festivals because it's a 2-hour commitment instead of a 2-day commitment to travel the country. So it's wonderful to get to bring you to Milwaukee. I want to thank you for your film. I want to congratulate you on it and on this reception. That email from the 80-year-old man, I'm like that you. It's like the one where you're like, yep, that comment. I've done something. Thank you so much for your film and for your time this evening, Maria.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you for showing the film. We were honored to be included.
Oh, yes. And I'd like to bring on screen with me Aster Gilbert, our genderqueer coordinator. Hi, Aster.
Hello, Kara.
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Wow, what a wonderful discussion. If you haven't seen that movie, Dilemma of Desire, do check it out. Now we're going to move to the second part of what Kara has called our virtual ladies' night and talk about a film that is both in our Doc Festival faves and the Genre Queer program, and that is the film Ahead of the Curve. Joining me now are the filmmakers of this film, so please give I guess if we were in person, we'd be clapping right now. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I guess to kick it off, I would love if you could introduce yourself and the role that you played in the film.
Oh, sure. I'm Jen Rainin. I'm the director and co-producer and slightly featured on camera.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, my name is Rivkah, Beth Medow, and I'm the producer and co-director.
Thank you so much. So to kick things off then, I would really love, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear, how did this project come about? When did it start? And since there are co-directors, how did you each get involved in this project?
Well, this film really started because I married an extraordinary woman. And this woman started Curve magazine, which is the best-selling lesbian magazine in the world. And I knew that, of course, when I married her. She was getting ready to sell it at that time. And as I got to know her, she would just tell me these stories. Like, I think the one that really got me and pushed me over the edge of like, I've got to tell this story. She said, you know, when I decided to make this magazine, nobody would give me any money. I was going to put lesbian on the cover. That was a thing that wasn't done. I mean, even people within our community thought that this couldn't happen, but I wanted it for me. So I took out 12 credit cards in one day and I cashed them all out and I went to the racetrack and bet on the horses. And I won 3 times in a row, she said. So, you know, things like that were falling in my lap. I thought, this is an amazing story. This would make a great fiction film. So I started writing a screenplay for it, and it came up with a good treatment. And I did a bunch of research. And in my research, I realized it was actually it was hard to find source material. It was hard to find good nonfiction stories about our heroes, about queer women who paved the way for us today. And, you know, just it occurred to me that really I felt a real imperative to tell this as a nonfiction film. For the community. So I got started on that path and reached out to my dear friend Rivkah, who I'd known for some years at that point, and she's an accomplished filmmaker. This is my first film that I've directed. I've been involved in the film world for some time, but more in front of the camera and not behind. And asked her if she might be interested. And I think the first time I tentatively asked you, Rivkah, you were like, oh well, let's stay talking about it. And about a year went by, and I did some groundwork and asked again.
Well, yeah, you had, because I wasn't sure how far along you were, and I didn't know exactly what you wanted it to be like, but we were driving in a car, I think, over the Bay Bridge, and we were headed to a friend's party, and you were telling me, I was asking you how the search for the producer was going, and you were saying, well, you know, I'm thinking about this person, I'm thinking about that person. And I said something like, well, have you thought about this person? And then you said, well, I have. And so, yeah, that's how I got involved. That night we sealed it. And then I think we were filming like 3 months later. So, yep, that was quick. Fascinating.
I always love hearing these stories because it's always so interesting and humbling to hear how really incredible films get started just through connections and people you know and live with. I'd really like to hear about, as co-directors, how was there like a specific way that you divided up the duties, or what portions of the films you were looking at, or was it more of like a symbiotic relationship like throughout the whole process, or?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I haven't really thought about it like that before. I don't think we really divvied things up, certainly not intentionally. I mean, again, you know, Rivkah being a more experienced filmmaker, there were things about production that she certainly knew that I didn't know how to do. And so I learned, and really the filmmaking, making this movie was like a giant masterclass for me. But really, like, we're extremely collaborative people and very aligned. And every time there was any disagreement at all, it's really been fascinating. It turns out every time we were thinking the same thing and expressing it differently. So we just had to keep talking until we got the right language.
Yeah, we did a lot of writing together, and I think that really aligned us. We did a lot of applying for grants, and so through that you do a lot of writing and get really clear on what the story you have is and what the story, we would think about, what do we need, what are we missing. We got really adept at articulating, I think, what we had and what our story was about. And it's a funny thing to say, as filmmakers, like learning what your story is takes a while in long form doc. So yeah, we got to figure that out, and then we thought we had one film, and then another film opened up.
Yes, it did. We got thrown a curveball.
Yeah.
Do we want to elaborate on the curveball?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The audience? It's not any kind of a spoiler alert. It's what happens in the opening scenes of the film is in reality happened when we were maybe 3/4 of the way done shooting, which is that Franco, my wife, received an email from the current owner of Curve magazine saying, "God, I'm so sorry to have to say this, but it looks like we're probably going to be out of business within the year. We can't keep it going. But I'd like you to help me think through, what we should do next. Should Curve just go away, or is there a way for it to continue to serve the community and serve its mission?" And it happened to come through when we were headed to, where were we going? We went to Vegas, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, we were going to see Klexicon.
Right.
Yep.
So we were going to go host a panel at Klexicon, and we had our crew with us, and we just we pivoted from a largely interview and archival based film into a very alive, unfolding in front of us Verite style film. It's really something.
Thank you. Yeah, it's that touches on so many questions that I was really excited to ask, but I want to make sure just to switch gears a little bit, because I have so many questions on process and filmmaking and all that, but I do want to get on the subject of lesbian history, and because it was so wild to me watching it in the film, and also Jen, hearing you say this, that like one of the most important cultural watersheds of lesbian representation hinged on a successful racehorse bet. Which is wild, but that's just kind of how history works. But I find, and I've taught courses on LGBTQ history, and what I always find is with younger folks, this history is always at risk of being lost, even when, the history of Curve is not that old. It's still relatively contemporary, and I'd really love to hear your thoughts on the importance of telling lesbian stories, lesbian histories, even these recent ones, because that's what really struck. I mean, one, the film is just incredibly entertaining and informative, but I'll stop there because I'll keep going.
I think one of the things that we really came to realize in making this film is that the vast majority of queer focused films are male focused, which shouldn't have come as a surprise to me, I guess, but it really did. It really did. As women in general, our stories are not told enough. And as queer women, we're kind of the invisible of the invisible in some ways. And then you layer on, queer women of color or queer women with disabilities, like my wife. These stories are not told. They're just not told enough. So I don't know. We need to change that. Rivkah and I feel, I think, very strongly about it, and so strongly that we've decided to continue working together. We've started on a few new projects all focused on telling stories that center on strong queer women, because it is a little better than it was certainly when I was growing up and when Franco was growing up, and she didn't even realize you could be a gay woman. Can you imagine? Like having not seen any representation or known of any out queer women. So, that's just in my lifetime. I'm not that old. So yeah, it's interesting. That, and I don't know, Rivkah, do you want to talk a little bit about what we learned about queer spaces? Because that was something that we really examined quite a bit in the film.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that we learned a lot about queer space was that obviously the physical queer spaces we've been losing those for a long time. Lesbian bars and bookstores have been on the decline for many, many years. And queer and non-binary folks are gathering in different ways online, but there was this real hunger for gathering in person. And so when we were meeting our activists who Franco was looking to answer the questions like, do we need a magazine right now, and what for, and how are people connecting, we went to several gathering spaces where lesbians and queer women and non-binary folks and allies were gathering in person, and it was incredibly inspiring. Places like Lesbians Who Tech, and places like Klexicon. We went to the Dinah,
Oh yeah.
just really, and there were several people who we talked with. Their exchanges. Mariah Hansen says it in the film too. She says, we're our own culture. We still need our own spaces, right? We need to claim those. There's a different kind of empowerment that happens from, seeing, just being surrounded by people who are like you. Yeah.
Yeah. You can breathe out.
Mm-hmm.
These are such important points that you're bringing up. And Jen, a comment or a thought popped in my head when you were talking about the limited amount of films and representations. As a film programmer, my job is basically to watch queer films all year round. And if it was a pie chart, it's like a tiny little sliver of available lesbian films and representations. And then not to get into the whole conversation of bad or problematic representations and how you work with that stuff and things like that, non-lesbians making films about lesbians and all that sort. So I think these are really, really essential topics that you're bringing up that are also really well represented and talked about in the film. But anyway, the question I'm getting to, what it leads me to is, did you have any difficulties with getting this film off the ground or getting funding, getting people on board? Because there is this kind of, even within the queer community, it's like, I'm not that interested in lesbian films, and here's 100 films about gay men, which I'm not knocking gay men. I love gay men. The films are great, but it really is an issue of proportion and support. I would love to hear any thoughts or experiences regarding your film related to getting support for it.
Suzanne Westenhofer, who's also featured in the film, comedian, talks about, even today, she'll go to an open mic comedy hour. This is an established, brilliant comedian. And she'll go to sign up, and she still sometimes will hear, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. We already have a woman on the lineup tonight." And, 7 men. We had a similar thing happen. I think we applied for many grants, many grants, sometimes multiple times the same grant. And we got a lot of no's and very rarely got feedback, but occasionally we would get some feedback. Well, we already funded a lesbian film. It's still happening. Come on, people. Not okay. Yeah, super frustrating. But we were really fortunate with this film. I think it's because of the subject. Curve magazine is so beloved in the queer women's community. And Franco has left a trail of goodwill everywhere she's ever gone. So there were a number of women who, just individuals who wanted to see this film get made, who were really helpful. So it was good fortune with my subject, right? It is hard.
Rivkah, did you? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I was just, if I'm going to add anything, it's really just that we really took a page from Franco's book when we were thinking about how we're going to make this film, and we wanted to make it the way Franco made her magazine, which was with, by, and for community. So, I mean, it gets to what Kim Cattrall also says, another featured cast in our film. She talks about being the authors of our own experience, which I think is, after it's like what you're talking about earlier, right? Like, who's making the film? And the reason that's important is because if you come from the community about which you're making the film, then there's certain shorthand, or there's like questions that you're more likely to explore or develop, or, areas that just become more compelling, right? Because that it's a thing happening either in community, or it's a thing that's happening like the way, dominant culture sees our community. And so I think that idea of being the authors of our own experience, telling our own stories, helping each other, like bring our stories to light, amplifying each other's stories, especially amplifying the stories of women of color, more marginalized people in our communities, women with disabilities. We really listened a lot. And I think that's also part of, part of the way we want to bring the film into the world, really, is together, with our community.
I think building off of that, I would love to hear what responses have you been getting from audiences and people that have seen this film? Because it does so much of this.
Well, I guess, man, I guess I want to tell a story about our premiere a little bit.
Please.
We premiered at Frameline, and I mean, it was a crazy experience. We imagined that, we originally envisioned that we would premiere at the Castro Theater in San Francisco. It's a famed, giant, beautiful theater, and it would have been filled to the rafters with screaming dykes, and it would have been amazing. And then COVID, and we thought, wow, it's, what's it going to be? We'll just appear in people's living rooms, and then, sort of nothing. But Rivkah had this brilliant idea, because Frameline was doing a showcase around Pride, or what would have been Pride. And we were able to screen on the night that would have been Dyke March. She suggested to Frameline that we perhaps could do it at a drive-in, and we ended up at the drive-in. We filled 2 screens. They allowed 1,000 cars to come, and there's so much more to this story. It's just nutty. I'm sure Rivkah will have some more to fill in after, but to be in a space with 1,000 cars, which was about close to 2,500 people, and to watch, with holding my breath the entire time, how people took it in, and to walk around and hear people, laughing and saying, "Oh yeah, go Franco," or, "Oh, I was there when that happened," or, "I can't believe it. I can't believe that happened." I mean, it's so overwhelming. And at the end of the screening, to have the cars erupt into horns honking and lights flashing and people screaming into the night, it was overwhelming. And that, we had one more drive-in experience in LA Outfest, and it was the same kind of thing. And I mean, since then we've gotten, emails and messages through our website, women and people, just all sorts of people who are seeing this film and are so happy and grateful. The most interesting responses, I feel like, we certainly are getting a lot of folks who say, "Oh my gosh, there's an old picture of me that you found at Michigan Fest," or whatever it is. "And there I am. It was so cool to see me there and all my naked goy," or whatever. And wasn't I skinny? But what I think was really surprising to us is younger queer women and non-binary people are seeing this film and are really moved and saying, we want to know. We're hungry for our own history. we need these stories, and so they're really very they're really finding it really compelling, and that makes me really happy.
Rivkah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that's pretty complete. Yeah, it was a blast. I guess just that, people dressed up and decorated their cars. And then, the fact that like the equivalent, our COVID time standing ovation was like a lot of car honking and hooting and hollering. I mean, it was really sweet. We had a big dance party. We had a DJ. Paige Hodel was our DJ. And it was like connected. And that felt incredible. We're so grateful to do this festival run. We're so happy to be with you this at Milwaukee Film Festival. And it's like, this is a really different way of connecting with people. And I love that we're doing this and we're live, and it's phenomenal, right? And at the same time, like, we miss seeing our audiences. We miss you all. We want your questions, we want that too. Yeah.
I guess that's a really good place for this next question, also before we run out of time, because I'm hoping there's future projects where we can bring you to Milwaukee physically when we have another festival in the post-COVID times. Do you have projects that you're working on now, or what's next for this film that you can talk about? I know sometimes projects have to be a little hush-hush until they're ready to be birthed into the world, but what's next on your plate?
Rivkah, will you tell, please?
Okay, so without giving too much away, I'll say that Jen and I are writing. How much can we say? Can we say we're writing an episodic?
Yeah, I think we could say we're writing a pilot, and it's the most fun thing ever.
It's so much fun. We're writing an episodic based on Franco's story, and it, takes place in the 90s in San Francisco, and really encapsulates a lot of that incredibly liberating time where, a lot of us lesbians, a lot of queer folk, a lot of people really found ourselves in ways that we weren't allowed to be before. Yeah. Or didn't feel like we could be, really. So yeah, we're writing. That's really fun. We have a couple feature documentaries that we are executive producing coming out in the next year or two, and then a short documentary also, which is getting pretty close to done. So yeah.
We'll send it your way.
Yeah.
Please do. I am so excited to see anything that you make next. I guess one last question, since we do have a little bit more time. I wanted to ask this earlier, but in the previous part of this conversation with Maria talking about dilemmas of desire, she said that regarding like sexual liberation, that we've kind of slid backwards a bit. And I am curious to hear what your thoughts are on the current state of lesbian representation. Do you feel that it's a better, more open place, or are we sliding back a little bit? Where do you pinpoint it? If that's too big of a question, we can move on.
That's an interesting question. I mean, in terms of our rights, we're definitely sliding backward, but I think we know that, right? Everybody knows that. We're literally under attack.
You either feel it in your bones or your rights aren't being taken away. I think that's maybe where we're
That is it. Yeah, gosh, in terms of lesbian visibility, queer women's visibility, there's just not enough. It's just not enough. And I feel like with our spaces going away, with our queer publications struggling and disappearing one by one, it's feeling a little scary. But I also am really encouraged particularly by the younger queer women who we have been privileged to meet and spend time getting to know through making this film. They're out there and they are fighting, and we're seeing the fight in more intersectional ways now, I think, or maybe I'm just becoming more aware of how intersectional the ways are that we're making ourselves known. Yeah, I don't know. What else, Rivkah?
Yeah, I know we're about to run out of time, and so I just want to say, yeah, I think I've been really encouraged as well by the women that we've met, and just the ways in which people are really feeling into their own agency around making what they want to see in the world and doing the work that they want to see. I think about Andrea Pino Silva kind of carving her way and getting her message out and using, she is really using the platform from this film to talk about cross movement work, to get the vote out. We think about those opportunities where we do get voice, right? So now, we can take this conversation and encourage everyone to go vote, right? Like, look at who's running, who is part of our community, has a pro LGBTQ plus agenda, right? Like, we can talk about this, and we can go and, incredibly consequential election. We can also talk to our families. I know we started with desire and freedom, and I mean, you're also talking to two women who live in the Bay Area, and like, I'm a polyamorous person, and so like feel pretty liberated personally, but at the same time, like, culturally, I think it really depends on where you're living and who you're surrounding yourself with,
Yeah, there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a really great place, I think, to wrap this up. I want to thank you both so much for this truly amazing film that I think does a lot to push forward this work that we've been talking about. Thank you for taking the time to be here virtually in Milwaukee and to share your experiences with the film. It's really inspiring. And I wish you the best of luck in your next projects.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you, Milwaukee. Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. How wonderful to be with you. Take care.
Perfect. And with that, everyone, oh no. Yep, we're done. We're wrapping up. Thanks for watching, everyone.